Okay, so we recently covered the Killing Floor 3 beta, how it was terribly received by the community, which inevitably led to the game's delay, but that might have actually been the best possible outcome for the game. Tripwire wasted no time before announcing the game's delay after the beta's poor reception, and they confirmed that they're working on some pretty big changes before the game is going to be released. So far, we've had the confirmation of performance and stability improvements, UI and UX redesigns, lighting changes, and overhauls to the weapon feel, whatever that may mean. I heard a lot of people criticizing the way the weapon's handled, but as somebody who wasn't actually able to play the beta themselves, I can't really comment on that. One of the biggest issues with the game being the specialist system is being addressed, but after the game has launched. So I'm eagerly awaiting to see what the community's reaction to that is going to be when we finally get our hands on the game. For now, we still don't know when the game is going to be released, or I don't even think we have a time window other than at some point, hopefully still within 2025. But it's not like Tripwire have gone completely radio silent, or at least they didn't initially. Just a handful of days after the delay was initially announced, we got our first look at an update for the City Streets map that completely overhauled the aesthetic of the map while keeping the bones the same. From what I was able to tell, this went down really well with the community, and then about a week later, we got a look at the new UI, or at least specifically the in-game HUD, that again, I think was quite well received. It evokes a lot more of that Killing Floor 2 aesthetic and feels so much more stylized than the HUD we saw in the beta. Just 2 days after that, we got our first look at the relit radar station map. This map, while I don't think it was in the beta, was in the gameplay reveal trailer. At least I'm 90% sure, judging from the sort of environments, that this is that map. And the difference between what we saw in that trailer and this concept art is night and day, quite literally. Even though I think the second and third screenshots we were shown of this map are a little weaker than the first and fourth. I've got to say, I really like the fog. I think that's a really nice aesthetic, and I hope that translates in-game, and the way the red lighting bounces through the fog is also something I really hope they can get right in-game. That's going to bring a much more sinister tone to the map than what we saw in that gameplay trailer. As a side note, the description we got for this map is that this besieged outpost contains clues to the origins of the latest wave of Z outbreaks, and asks if we can survive long enough to piece them together. That sets off all of the right little signals in my brain. Immediately, I really want to explore this map and see the sort of visual storytelling that it has to offer. I've got my fingers crossed that there's some really hidden things for us in there to discover. The description continues at the end of the blog post, explaining that this map has multi-level interiors and a forest-adjacent setting, going on to say that this now abandoned facility lies in ruin, overrun by Zeds released during an unauthorized military exercise. I don't know much about the Killing Floor story. In fact, I know very, very little, but I am intrigued. As somebody who is a massive fan of the subtle storytelling we see in games like Call of Duty Zombies, I really hope that we see some of that in Killing Floor 3. I don't know if that's what one can typically expect from a Killing Floor game, but the way this blog post in particular is worded has got me feeling like it could be the case. As I said though, the second and third image in this blog post weren't as visually interesting as I felt they could have been, but that all changed with the very next blog post we received just 1 week later. This blog not only confirmed that the game is going to launch with 8 playable locations, but also gives us a look at one of the new locations that we haven't seen before, sewers. Immediately, the aesthetic of this map is a lot more grimy, which is a very good thing. It's quite different from Radar Station and different again from City Streets. It seems like there are going to be a lot more close quarters areas, especially within the sewers themselves, which is a nice contrast from the more open looking maps we've seen so far. Immediately, it gives me the impression that if you're running away from a group of enemies in this map, you're going to want to be careful to make sure you don't get sandwiched between another group of enemies. Of course, the map doesn't seem to be without its open areas as well, taking a look at the exterior for example, but it still looks a little bit more compact than the other maps we've seen. The final image is called the Containment Room, which, as I said before, I love little narrative things you can find hidden around the world to explore, so this room in particular has got me intrigued. I want to take a closer look at what's on that whiteboard, and for some reason, it looks strikingly like an Among Us character. I don't know if that's just me, but something definitely feels sus about that. Taking a look at the map's description, it speaks about the Maya, a mutagenic plague that has spread through the sewers of a small Japanese town. Horzine researchers sent to investigate reported an unusual crawler infestation before going silent. Now, Nightfall must brave the depths and discover the horrifying truth. Again, hinting that there is a lot to discover in this map narratively, which, if true, has ticked a very big box for me. The description continues at the end of the blog post saying that sewers plunges players deep into labyrinth corridors filled with industrial machinery and rivers of noxious wastewater. Every corner turned here is a gamble, and you'll have to be hyper-vigilant as you navigate the dark tunnels swarming with wave after wave of Zeds. I understand that a sewers map was a particularly large part of the original Killing Floor mod, and so this kind of feels like a map that they have to get right, and judging from the comments on this blog post, people seem to be pretty happy with it. The same goes for the comments on the previous blog post. Of course, they're not all stellar, but the majority seem to be positive. I never want to claim to be some sort of Killing Floor authority. I'm actually very new to the franchise and hoping to use Killing Floor 3 as a way to really get stuck in, so for now, it's exceedingly important for me to highlight the community's response as well as my own thoughts. Speaking of my own thoughts, if you are enjoying the video, all I ask is that you consider subscribing. We currently have the goal of reaching 5,000 subscribers, and in my last Killing Floor 3 video, I said that if I receive 100 subscribers from Killing Floor content alone, I'm going to be playing Killing Floor 1 for the very first time on stream. Anyway, back to the topic at hand. Obviously, we've just gone through some of the things we've been shown since the game was delayed. These blog posts were given to us in relatively quick succession, with the longest time we had to wait between blog posts being a week. But it's now been nearly 3 weeks since we've heard anything, and even then, besides for the HUD overhaul, the only things we've really seen have been concept arts for new or reworked maps, which, don't get me wrong, is fantastic, but at this point I trust that Tripwire are on the right path when it comes to the game's visual design. Seems like we've course corrected since the beta, and course corrected in the right direction, but now I want to learn more about the other things we can expect to see changed before launch. In the post announcing the game's delay, it was said that it's too early to say which fixes will be implemented by launch, but I've got to ask, is it still too early? It's been over a month since the game was delayed, so I hope that the team have a solid strategy of what's coming before and after now. Or at the very least, I hope they have enough of an idea so that they can share a few more pieces of information with us. One of the things I praised Tripwire for so much in my initial video was just how open and transparent they were, showing us concept art just a few days after the game was delayed. And I will continue to praise them for showing us what they have over the last month, but I think it's really important that the community are shown a lot more than just UI and map reworks. At the end of the day, the main reason I praised Tripwire so much for showing us that map concept art when they did was because it gave the community an opportunity to provide feedback from very early on. I can't imagine that concept art existed from before the game's delay, so for it to be available to us within a week of the game's delay is something that I think is quite noteworthy. I was equally as impressed when we saw the HUD enhancements blog post within a week of that, but since then all we've got is 2 more instances of concept art for more maps. One map that we had kind of seen before, and the other that was entirely new. I'm not ungrateful that we received that concept art, not even in the slightest. I think the art looks fantastic, and the descriptions we got for the maps have me really intrigued, as I explained before. But I think it's exceptionally important that we are still shown new things on a semi-regular basis, simply because we then have the opportunity to give feedback where necessary. We've gone from receiving pretty much multiple blog posts per week to nothing for the last 2 and nearing 3. I'm not at all concerned by 2 weeks of silence, but I don't want Tripwire to lose the momentum that they were building up with their transparency. I would start to be a little bit concerned if we started hitting 4 weeks, or maybe even 5 weeks, with nothing new to see. Tripwire really have an opportunity to turn things around for Killing Floor 3. They're in a much more advantageous position than other games have found themselves in the past. I would really hate to see them stumble at the final hurdle by implementing some things that, if we were told as the community about them a little bit beforehand, we could have objected to. That is what I praised them for so much in my last Killing Floor 3 video, which if you're interested in, you can click through to on screen now. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.